Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is Reverend Donte Carroll, host of Turn Up the Volume podcast. And I just wanted to come to you guys briefly just to share some tips that I thought would be very important to share. And this particular show is going to be very brief. And I know that I have a lot of preachers that watch my show, that tune in, that may have seen some of my sermons, what have you, and you're wondering exactly how does Reverend Carroll prepare a sermon. And I just wanted to take a moment to spend some time to share some of my tips in terms of how I prepare for a sermon. And so we're going to title this very simple: How to Prepare a Sermon. All right. Well, one of the first things that you should always do when you're preparing a sermon is you should always first pray. All right. Pray. Pray and seek the Lord. Ask the Lord what He wants you to preach. Ask Him, God, is there a particular word that you have in mind for your people? Is there something that you want to say? Is there something that you're trying to get across to the people that I could be of service of in terms of relaying that message? All right. After you pray, you want to be open minded. Be open minded to what the Lord wants to share and what the Lord wants to show you. You have to always be open minded because our thoughts are not His thoughts, His ways are not our ways. And so you may have a sermon in mind or a topic in mind, but the Lord may have something different, and you have to always be open to that. The next thing I recommend in terms of preparing for a sermon is go on a fast. Some things only come by prayer and fasting, right? And sometimes it takes turning your plate over to seek the Lord's face, to say, Lord, I'm not going to eat another meal until you show me what it is you want me to preach and to say to your people. I'm that desperate to where I will refuse food in order for you to show me what you want me to preach. Another thing is study even when you don't have to preach. Some preachers have a habit of only studying when it's time to preach. My father, Pastor Robert Johnson, who pastors in Baltimore, always told me something in the infancy of my ministry that I remember to this day. And that is always have a sermon in your back pocket because you never know when you have to preach at the last minute. So you should always study even when you don't have to preach to keep your mind and your spirit fresh and open, because the Lord could be speaking at any given moment, so that whenever it's time to give a word, even if it's at the last minute, you will always have something to give to the people that's fresh. Another thing that you want to take into account when you're preparing your sermon is find the oddness of the text. A lot of sermons are always preached the same over and over again. Some of the sermons that we hear every year annually, but always read the text and find something that's very different. Find something that's strange. And seek the Lord and ask God, why does this stick out to me the most? Because in my experience, almost always when you find the oddness of the text, there's where you find fresh revelation. Next thing, pay attention to details and keywords, right? So if you're reading a sermon, if you're reading a text and you see keywords, obedience, for example, and you see certain names or certain keywords that stick out, pay attention to those words because they always mean something in the original translation, right? And that leads me to my next point. Use a lexicon and or an exhaustive dictionary of biblical names. Use a lexicon so that when you come across certain words, like for example the word obedience, you can use your lexicon to find out what it means in the Greek, what it means in the Hebrew. Also, another thing that I find very helpful is I've also had me in my study an exhaustive dictionary of biblical names, so that when I come across different passages, I may see certain names, find out what those names mean. A lot of times when you find out what those names mean and you use your lexicon, it helps to reveal exactly what's really going on in the text a whole lot more. Another thing, don't be afraid to find you a catchy topic. Sometimes the people love catchy topics because they want to find out how you're going to make this topic relate to the text that you decided to preach. Next thing, one final thing, organize your sermon. Everybody's preparation methods are different. If you find yourself to be one of those people that are all over the place, don't be afraid to use organization skills or an outline. Outline your notes. Outline them so much so to where you have bullet points that remind you when you look down at the paper in terms of what you want to preach or what you want to focus on or what you want to talk about in your sermon. There's a lot of tips, there's a lot of ways and a lot of methods to prepare yourself to preach the sermon that God has laid upon your heart. These are just a few of my tips and methods that you can use to help you in your sermon preparation time. Until next time, I'm Reverend Donte Carroll. I love you guys. Happy preaching. And as always, be blessed, people.